Hey guys, Buildzoid here, and today we're going to be doing some low-effort content, so we're going DDR5 shopping. Yeah, I've done zero prep. The thing is, there's been some new DDR5 memory chips coming out that are available, so I figured it'd be kind of interesting to sort of go through the various DDR5 options. Well, the funny thing is, there are new memory chips, but the best memory chips are still Hynix A-die and Hynix M-die. And yeah, like they're kind of interchangeable. If you're on AMD, they're kind of interchangeable because the AMD memory controller just doesn't really clock that high. But if you're on Intel, you definitely want A-die because it's just better. Um, and that's kind of that. But oh, and we also have like the 24 gigabit memory chip, so we'll go through a few of those. Um, Though I will have to say, I have zero experience with 24 gig memory chips myself. Like, I've not used them. I've also not used any 32 gig DDR5 memory sticks yet. Um, but having more, like, I have experience with the memory chips that are used on those kinds of sticks. So, yeah, the main thing you run into, obviously, with, like, the 32 gig sticks and also 48 gig sticks is that they're harder on the memory controller because you've got more memory ranks. So, and that mainly means that you're not going to be able to hit as high clocks. It doesn't really affect the timings because the way you can think about it is the timings are for internal delays within the memory chip, and the clock is the part that affects the signal between the memory controller and the actual memory sticks, right? So, yeah. Anyway, we're just going to ignore the 8 gig DDR5 stick options because they're generally not very good. And now we're going to go through. Now, if I'm not mistaken, so Team Group has some, I think it is this. Yeah, so this right here, and man, it took me to Amazon UK, which is annoying. But anyway, if you can find, oh, that's actually not that much cheaper than just regular. And actually, no, I think for A-die this might be cheaper. Anyway, this should be A-die because this right here is 5600 CL46. That is a JDEC spec. M-die, I don't believe has a 5646 JDEC bin. And yeah, so this, this is a very, if you're going to manually overclock, this is a very good option for sourcing Hynix A-die memory sticks. It might also, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's almost always Hynix A-die. So, yeah, this is something you should sort of keep an eye out on. It's worth noting, though, you can't just automatically assume that, oh, it's like a high-speed JDEC spec, it's going to be Hynix. It's specifically this memory kit. And I think Team Group has, like, one other, like, JDEC spec, guaranteed Hynix kit that tends to go for a really, good price. But, yeah, this is the sort of like the famous one, I guess. Like I've heard of this one before. This isn't the first time I'm seeing it. Um, but yeah, so that exists. Um, and this I think is going to be just random. I don't think this is going to be anything specific. Because Micron these days actually does have a 5600 JDEC bin, as far as I know. So that's probably a mix. But anyway, let's keep going. So then we have 5640, 6040. Whoa, you can actually get like... So at the very least... So these are going to be like mixed bins, where it's like you might get Samsung, you might get Hynix. But it shouldn't be like... If you're on Ryzen, that actually isn't too much of an issue, as I've showed like Samsung on Ryzen. Like, yeah, the TRFC is awful, but now that you can max out the refresh interval, that hurts a lot less than it used to. Right, because on AM4 having good TRFC is super important because with TRFC the important thing is how much runtime does the memory spend refreshing, and if you can't adjust the refresh interval, that is it's the only way to reduce the amount of time spent refreshing is with the refresh cycle itself. But with AM5, you can just crank the refresh interval to 65,000, and then it doesn't matter that you spend, 800 clock cycles refreshing the memory rank. Oh, actually, it is a memory rank, yeah, because AMD doesn't use the granular refresh functionality that DDR5 has. So, yeah, like this, I mean, obviously I would lean towards that Team Group, like T-Create Classic kit, because that is guaranteed Samsung. I mean, guaranteed Hynix. But if you can't find that, like these silicon power 5640, 6040, they're viable. Um, you know, like yeah, like they are viable. I guess you could also get some of the newer Micron ICs in this. I think those do like atrocious TRCD, so maybe that's not a concern. Um, and this is flat 40s. This looks like a weird Samsung bin or a Hynix bin. So yeah, this should be relatively safe, I think. Um, anyway, let's keep going. So we have a bunch of 4800 rated stuff, and there's absolutely no reason to even consider that. We have a T-Create Classic in 48. Wait, is that another JDEC? Oh, but these don't mention the Hynix ICs. But I'm pretty sure this is a JDEC bin. This might also be Hynix most of them. Actually, I'm not sure about this one. Not sure about this one, and I think if you can find this, you can probably find the other T-Create kit that's like, that actually advertises having Hynix memory chips. Anyway, let's keep going. And we have some, the funny thing is, like, there's very little reason, like, unless if you are manually overclocking, like, there's very little reason not to just get this, right? Like, if you can find this, there's because as far as I know, and my experience with, like, admittedly, I haven't tested, like, a huge variety of Hynix A-die sticks, but my experience with Hynix memory chips in general for DDR5 is that they're extremely consistent. They all clock very similarly, and the main difference that I've seen is, like, the primary timings being, 1 or 2 ticks from memory kit to memory kit, if even that. So, like the whole like, oh, but the spec is really like low is not actually a concern because the Hynix memory chips are so damn consistent that pretty much like you're like a kit like this is going to do DDR5, say 7600 just fine. The real limiting factor for that kind of speed is going to be like your motherboard and your CPU. And I guess if you have an Apex, it might even do DDR5 8000, but I wouldn't know about that because I don't have an Apex, and I'm not interested in spending that kind of money on a motherboard. Anyway, let's keep going. I'm not really seeing anything particularly interesting here right now. Mostly because of that team group kit. Like this makes everything just kind of irrelevant. It's just like, well, if you're manually overclocking, I don't know why you would pay extra for anything else. So do we start getting some? No, that's like 36. Yeah, we're really not seeing any particularly good specs. 6038. I guess this might be a decent like expo option. Yeah, flat 38s is a weird one because it's like technically this is very doable for Samsung memory chip. Actually, I'm not sure if it's doable at 1.25 volts for this clock, but those timings are very doable for Samsung memory chips. But also, this is very much like a Hynix doesn't really do low TRCD in like XMP bins. So this could also be Hynix, but the main issue is like it's like this exists, right? Right? This is a real problem. Like this existing just makes everything more expensive than it kind of irrelevant unless you really don't want to overclock your memory yourself. But the thing is, yeah, I guess the stock performance on this would actually be pretty atrocious. Because CL, yeah, like this is 46. Like with DDR5, the primary timings aren't that important to performance. Because you have like the dual channel, like the memory sticks are dual channel. Like there's just a bunch of optimizations with the design of DDR5 to make them make the timings even less important. But yeah, like this is very very loose and the speed isn't very high. So yeah, these if you don't overclock these you're probably giving up a decent amount of performance, especially with something like Ryzen, I guess. So I guess we should find something that's like a good Ryzen memory kit option. Oh, is this? I'm pretty sure this is Corsair Samsung, isn't it? Yeah, this is 363636. So this is like a relatively high bin Samsung kit, but again, it's just I don't know why you would buy that. Um, we have more Samsung for like a higher price than that crazy Hynix kit from Team Group. We have a 6036 again. Not interested. Like, if you're going to be buying a memory kit because you just want to use the XMP profile, you should be looking at like I think like a 6030, which we have here. Yeah. So this is something I would definitely consider. Right. This is definitely going to be Hynix. It's 304040, which that TRCD is. The funny thing is, I actually have like MDI kits that really don't like doing low TRCD. Which yeah, but this would be like a good XMP memory kit option. Let's keep going to see if we can find some other more. Well, the thing is, I think G-Skill has like a 3238 bin instead of just this 3040 bin, and the thing is, 2 ticks of TRCD or 2 ticks of TCL, kind of the same thing. Because of the order. Well, TRCD technically is more of a limiting. Like if your workload is skipping from memory address to like from row to row really quickly, because the just like the data set is just very random, and big. Then TRCD is actually sort of more important to performance than TCL is. But again, we're on DDR5, 2 ticks of like trading 2 ticks of TCL for TRCD is just like, it's kind of a wash. But certainly something like this G-Skill Flare X kit, which is, what is it? This is 6032. Yeah, so you have like this 3238. I'm relatively certain if you ran benchmarks on these, they would perform the same. Also, these are both Hynix bins. So yeah, I would like, if you want like a strong-ish XMP, this is what I'd be basically looking at, is these G-Skill like 6000 low cast latency kits. I wouldn't bother with anything that's like 5600 rated just because, like, again, this exists. So yeah, anyway, let's keep going. I'm not really seeing anything particularly interesting. Also, over time, ADI is getting more and more common as it like replaces MDI in terms of production completely for Hynix. So, it used to be that if you were buying these lower speed kits, you could get MDI a lot of the time. But these days, like as time goes on, it's going to be more and more common that you're going to buy like a low spec kit and it's just going to be ADI anyway. Right? Because the thing is with the memory chips, like these are mass produced parts, right? Like like Hynix didn't design ADI because better timings or higher. Well, they did design it for higher clocks, but the main reason they've made it is like it's probably cheaper to produce than MDI is, right? Because like the primary customer for all memory manufacturers is like data centers, so that's their priority. It's just like make more cheaper RAM for data centers. And the side effect of that is like you can have like very strong memory chips that are just super duper common. Like they're just everywhere. With DDR4, Samsung BDI was kind of an anomaly in that it was a really early. Well, it's not that much of an anomaly. It's not that rare that like a super early production memory chip is just kind of the best in terms of performance. But BDI is weird because nothing ever really competed with it ever for DDR4. DDR5 BDI from Samsung is not great. But anyway, yeah. So I'm really not seeing like we have G-Skill and like this Team Group T Create Classic kit so far is sort of the only real recommendations like I would make. I'm kind of hoping to see some high speed stuff. Oh yeah, so if you're on Intel and you want like an XMP, that's pretty much guaranteed to work on any motherboard with 13th gen, not 12th gen. If you're on 12th gen, this will probably not work on any motherboard with more than 2 DIMM slots. But if you're on 13th gen, this should work on pretty much every board. So like 6800 CL38. So that's an option. And that has to be a die. This literally, it is. Okay, well, no, it's not impossible to do these kinds of timings at this voltage with MDI, but it's not possible with the like reliability requirements of an XMP spec, right? MDI never, yeah, as far as I know, well, no, I think Corsair had like a 6600 MDI bin, but there was never an MDI 6800 bin. That was just never produced because while MDI can hit those kinds of speeds, it's not very good at it. So yeah, if you're an actual like memory kit manufacturer and you're making XMP profiles, you don't want to make an XMP profile where it's like this is really pushing the limits of what these memory chips can do on a very large number of motherboards, right? So yeah. Anyway, so we have some 6400 kits. I don't really see a lot of like 6400 is just a weird speed because it like doesn't really like on Intel it's kind of slow, right? Like 6800 generally works without any issues, and on AMD it doesn't work. Okay, the vast majority of AMD CPUs will not run DDR5 6400 at all. They just will not do it, especially now that AMD is rolling out the like SoC voltage restriction because a lot of CPUs, like a lot of the chips that did do 6400 on the like early BIOSes, like you needed so much SoC voltage, like insane amounts of SoC voltage. That's why the motherboard manufacturers were defaulting the SoC voltage to like 1.35 volts, 1.4 volts, or even higher, is because the memory controller on Ryzen 7000 does scale with SoC voltage. So yeah, like if you have a CPU that can do like 6300 and 1.3 volts SoC, then it can probably do 6400 at 1.4. But that also means like, yeah, 6400 is just like, it's a weird bin. Like it's kind of slow for Intel. It's not really that cheap and it's not going to work on most AMD CPUs. So I would just not like, yeah, it just doesn't really make a ton of sense. So for Intel, I would start like, if you want a strong XMP for Intel, I'd be looking at like 6800 rated kits. So like this 6800 CL34 from Team Group, that should actually, there's overclocking headroom on that. It has to be Hynix A die. If you have a strong motherboard, you should be able to push a kit like that all the way to like DDR5. Well, strong motherboard and strong CPU, so an Apex, you should be able to do up to like DDR5 8000 with an A die kit. So, or I guess if you just have really low standards for your system's stability, you can do 8000 on a lot of motherboards. But anyway, so we have so I was kind of hoping to see one of the, actually I wonder what this is. Oh no, this is 3445, so this is still going to be, yeah, this should still be Hynix. But there is a new Micron memory chip which is partially disabled 24 gigabit. That Corsair sticks into some of their high speed bins. Oh yeah, I think this is the old Corsair like 6600 MDI bin. This is actually kind of aggressive for on the TRCD on the primaries. I wouldn't necessarily. Yeah, I think this was an MDI bin. At this point, it would be a die because there's just no reason to use MDI in a 6600 kit these days. But also, there's no reason to buy a six. Well, you know, if you get really unlucky, I guess it isn't completely impossible that a 6800 wouldn't work on some motherboards with a 13th gen CPU. So in that scenario, this is kind of a better option. Also because like the timings on this are like the you know, similar speed, but the thing is it's $20 higher price. Like this doesn't make a ton of sense. Like from a performance per dollar perspective, this doesn't make a lot of sense. This is more like I really don't want to deal with my memory. Well, the thing is here, the other issue is like the primary timings don't make that much of a performance difference, right? So the whole like, oh, I'm going to buy a 6600 CL3239 kit because it's going to be marginally faster, or actually it might not even be faster, but it'll be perform pretty similarly to like a 6800 CL34 44 TRCD 44 kit, and I won't like it'll have better compatibility because the speed is lower. is like, yeah, but it's not actually much faster. Or like the speed will be very similar and you are spending more money on it. So um I'm really surprised that so many DDR5 kits have just like insanely loose TRCD for some reason. Well, the thing is, TRCD is one of the timings that tends to be kind of temperature sensitive, so I guess it makes sense from the perspective of like we want this to work in a hot box, right? Like that's one of the concerns for an XMP profile from the manufacturers is like, what if the user has a 4090 in a case with no airflow? Will our memory kit still work? Right? And that's probably part of why you have such like awful TRCD on a lot of memory kits is just like, well, that solves the cooling issues. Um, so anyway, let's keep looking. We have some. Well, actually, yeah. Well, let's keep looking because I want to find the wacky like micron bin. Is this no? This is actually like a good 8i bin, 3442. The price is like the price is not cost effective at all. Like I would, yeah, I would still take this team group kit instead. Also at 7200, you're looking at like serious compatibility issues. Like there are CPUs and motherboards where 7200 will not work unless you manually set a bunch of voltages because Intel's memory controller is a mess. Um, so yeah, if you want like a error and also all the motherboards have way too many DIMM slots. Like if you have a 1 DIMM per channel motherboard, 7200 is actually very reliable. If you have a 4 dimmer, uh, I hope you're feeling lucky buying your 7200 rated memory kit because a lot of the time it won't be stable. Um, even with with 13th gen CPUs. So anyway, I did not manage to find the weird micron bin that Corsair has yet. It's another 3239 at 6600. That is a really interesting speed bin. You know, like in the past, Corsair usually had like really boring like speed bins, and for DDR5 they have some rather interesting ones. Not very cost effective ones, but interesting. Um, Anyway, and then we have 6,000, 6,800. Wait, this is probably 40. Wait, is this? Yeah, so this is the wacky micron bin. Don't. Just don't. It's too expensive and it's not even fast. Right? Like, yeah, 40, 50, 50, 110 at 1.4 volts. Like, this is a lot of voltage, not clocked that high, and the timings are terrible. Right? So, this would make sense if it was like cheaper than this team group kit, but it isn't. So just don't. Okay? Like this no. Um so yeah, but Corsair has like cuz so as far as I know that is 24 gigabit micron cut down into 16 gigabit. Um and yeah, and Corsair has these like wacky like high speed but extremely loose timing kits with a lot of voltage. Um I don't know why they bother. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like this is like cost wise, this is just not competitive at all. With a lot of like, it's not competitive with this, even remotely. Right? It's just worse, and it's $40 more expensive. Um, so anyway, let's keep going. So we've got some G-Skill 7200 kits, which, you know, CL34. I mean, we've seen some 7200 kits. The thing is, I don't really like once you get to DDR5 7200, right? There is that real concern of like I stick it in a 4-DIMM motherboard, it's not stable. And at that point, it's like, well, you know, so now you're going to have to go jumping through a bunch of hoops to get your memory to work properly. And I gotta ask, could you not have just bought them at cheap? Like, you know, you'd also like you'd be jumping basically through the same hoops that you'd be jumping through with something like this, right? Um, so these like high speed kits don't really make a ton of sense because in my experience, like on a lot of them, you turn on the XMP, and if you get unlucky enough with the motherboard and your CPU, then it's like, oh, it just doesn't work. I guess I'm gonna have to manually set up my memory anyway. So why did I pay all that extra money for a higher spec kit? I don't know. Um, and yeah, so 7200 is just like Like it's just there's no I don't see a practical reason to go for 7200 rated kits. Um, and then we have 7600 rated kits, which are very expensive, and the compatibility is even worse. Right? Like I'm just gonna pull up some G-Skill QVLs because G-Skill's QVL matches my experience with DDR5 very closely. Um, so Trident Z5 Neo. Wait, oh no, that's the AMD brand RGB there for Intel. So we're just gonna go through all the high-speed G-Skill kits, okay? So this is a 7600 rated kit. What does G-Skill QVL it for? Um, Basically nothing. Why? Because it basically doesn't work on most motherboards, right? Now, a lot of the motherboard manufacturers like Asus and Gigabyte have QVLs that are way more generous than what G-Skill has, but I don't I don't like as far as I'm concerned, Gigabyte's QVL for Z790 is just not usable because it doesn't match my experience with the Gigabyte boards that I have at all. Like Gigabyte has DDR5 8000 QVL'd for the master somehow. My master doesn't post above 7600, and at 7600 it's incredibly unstable. So, you know, like there like this is so I like G-Skill's QVL. G-Skill's QVL is very realistic and matches my experience. The motherboard manufacturer QVLs do not match my experience at all with DDR5. Um, and admittedly, G-Skill actually QVL's DDR5 7200 for quite a few boards. Where is it? But the thing is, like, you can get like 7200. You can get it to work on a lot of motherboards. You can. Um. So, yeah. But you might need to fiddle with voltages manually. Whereas, like, once you get to like 7600 on a lot of boards, it just doesn't work. You can bend over backwards, it will not work. Um. So that's kind of yeah, an annoying memory support list. Yeah, like I don't get this at all. Like there is no way that I am ever like I can't even get that speed to post on my Z790 Master, like at all. It's not even close to booting up at that speed. At the 7600 it boots up, but the stability is atrocious. So, um, yeah, G-Skill's QVL is very realistic. The motherboard manufacturer QVLs feel like they were designed to sell more motherboards rather than to give people realistic expectations of the Intel 13th gen memory controller, as well as maybe the motherboards. Like I've heard that apparently the actual like PCB quality is starting to become an issue at the high memory speeds where it's like board to board, like you could buy multiple copies of the same board and they'll all clock memory slightly differently because at these really, really high speeds, slight manufacturing tolerances in like the etching of the traces affect the memory speed, which is just like, well, that's all the more reason to avoid high-speed DDR5 in my opinion, because that's just insanity. It's like, oh no, it's not that you bought a bad motherboard, you bought an unlucky motherboard. And it's just like so anyway, this DDR5 7000, this isn't anything special. I would not consider this. So yeah, once you get up to these high speeds, it's just like, you know, if you hate your system functioning properly, go for it. I would say like, because here's the thing, like, you could just buy this really cheap team group kit and then manually tune it, and you would run into all the same problems that you would run into with the XMP of this. Because, yeah. So these, like, high-speed DDR5 kits, they do not make sense at all, as far as I'm concerned, because they do not work. Maybe Intel will figure out a memory controller that doesn't spontaneously lose stability at high speeds, or just, like, actually works properly at high speeds, and we get motherboards that can, work properly at these speeds. But as of right now, like, my experience with 13th gen is that, like, past 6800, things get very difficult very quickly. And like 7200 isn't too bad yet. But once you go past 7200, the stability just becomes a mess. A horrible mess. And the worst part is, it's not really unstable. Like, a lot of the time, it's not even that it's really, really unstable, it's just kind of unstable. So it takes forever to find out that, oh, it actually isn't stable. And it's just, yeah, no. I would basically stay away. Like, if you want a trouble-free experience, stay away from anything rated above 6800. And even, like, you could get so unlucky that even 6800 isn't going to work properly with 13th gen, but that is very unlikely, because even my very worst 13th gen CPU can do 6800 on basically every motherboard. Yeah, but like once we get into like 7200 and stuff, it's like, okay, now things get really, really difficult. So yeah, and then of course we have like these DDR5 8000 rated kits. And actually, G-Skill's QVL for DDR5 8000 is they've made these end of life. Oh, because I guess they're replacing them with the 24 gig sticks. That makes sense. So the thing is, these high-speed 24 gig memory kits, these are based on Hynix MDI 24 gigabit. MDI 24 gigabit clocks higher more easily than 16 gigabit ADI. As far as I know, it's also looser on the timings, but in terms of just raw speed, it's better. But anyway, the G-Skill QVL for 8000 is... and actually, I don't. My dark can kind of do 7800, with a 7800 rated kit, and then I've not managed to do 8000 on that board like at all. It doesn't even matter. Like if I use the profiles for 8000, they still don't work. So yeah, the Apex might do 8000, but I don't have one. But yeah. So these really, really high-speed kits is just kind of like... also, if your CPU sucks, it doesn't matter if your motherboard is great, you're still screwed with these high-speed kits. So, yeah, I would not recommend these unless you feel like manually tuning... And the thing is, if you feel like manually tuning your memory, why don't you just buy the cheap memory kit? Right? Buy the cheap one, overclock it yourself. It's going to probably behave exactly the same as if you buy a DDR5 8000 kit and stick it in a random motherboard. Because I've really not noticed, like G-Skill sent me a 7800 kit. I've not noticed it being particularly easier to work with than like the 7200 ADI that I already have. So... like, it's not even like, oh, I can turn on the XMP and the XMP just works. Because it doesn't. And that's true for, like, yeah, it just doesn't. It doesn't work on the dark. It doesn't work on the Tachyon. I have to manually set a bunch of voltages to get it to pass Y-Cruncher VST. So, yeah, these, like, high-speed kits are very much a case of, like, if you like pain and suffering, you can buy one of these and you can experience a lot of pain and suffering. So, anyway, so that's for the 2x16 options. They did add 2x24? Where is it? Where's 24 gig sticks? 2x48. Oh, there's 2x24. Okay, so a lot of the cheap 2x24 kits are Micron. And these can clock into like the mid 6000s, though Corsair somehow managed to get a 7000 bin out of Micron 24 gigabit ADI, I think it is. I'm not sure what the actual, like, might be BDI. I'm not sure right now. But yeah, so Corsair somehow managed to bin this into doing 7000 CL40. The timings are atrocious. Also, you can't, apparently the lower spec kits don't hit those kinds of speeds, like at all. So, like, Corsair has to be binning a lot of Micron to be getting these DDR5 7000 kits produced, because apparently, like, you can't just grab any random Micron kit and it'll do that speed. So there's like the memory chips aren't very consistent apparently. Um, Anyway, and then G.Skill has these like 7200 Hynix 24 gigabit and 8000 Hynix 24 gigabit. Um, and these, like, if you want high speeds, then these are sort of your, like, the other highlight, I think, is like this kit right here. It doesn't, like, the 24 gigabit Hynix IC doesn't do as tight timings, but it does actually clock higher than 16 gigabit ADI because it's just a new memory chip, and Hynix has basically refined the I/O portion. Well, like, they've just improved on the design of the memory chip, so it clocks higher. Um, right? So, yeah. Like, instead of buying something like this, because this is what, 240, I'd get this. I would get this because this is going to do this kind of speed far more easily than this does, right? Because this is 16 gigabit ADI Hynix. This is the new 24 gigabit memory IC from Hynix. This clocks more easily. So yeah, like this is like a compatibility nightmare, and this is just like, this should actually be like, you could have a weaker memory controller and this will still work better. Um, anyway, and then G.Skill has these in 8000, and like, you can, and I bet you the reason they're EOLing the old ADI 8000 bins is because they weren't very, like, the compatibility was atrocious probably. Because that is a very quick EOL. Right? And, like, yeah. So that's just going to be a like, we don't want to deal with supporting these memory kits anymore. Please stop selling them. So, yeah. So if you're, yeah, basically, if you're going to go buy a dumb DDR5 8000 kit, get this instead of the 16 gig sticks, because this might actually work a lot more of the time than the 16 gig sticks do. So anyway, so that's our 24 gig memory chips. Is we have, like, so basically you have Micron options that are very cheap and not great in terms of the clocks that they reach, and then you have Hynix options which clock really well, but they're also pretty expensive. So yeah, so that's our 24 gig options, and then we have 2x32. So for 2x32, the goal is, like, just find the cheapest Hynix-based speed bin possible. I wonder if Team Group delivers on that. I imagine they do. Yeah, I would assume this is Hynix. Yeah, I'd be pretty certain that this is Hynix. Just because this is a 5600 JDEC bin, and when you, like, this is a dual rank memory kit, when you're packing, two sets of memory chips onto a memory stick, having memory chips that are hard to run, like, say, Samsung memory chips, not particularly helpful with, making a memory kit. So, yeah. I would consider definitely, like, for 2x32, I would consider this a strong option, because I'm pretty sure that should be Hynix most of the time. And then, Team Group has a 6000 bin, and this has to be Hynix. Like, this almost certainly has to be Hynix, especially, what voltage are they running this at? Like, if this is 1.1 volts JDEC, then has to be Hynix. Okay, I guess we're going to check Newegg's website. Maybe they'll have more details. Yeah, this is 1.1 volts. It's JDEC. This has to be Hynix. Nobody else makes memory chips that reliably do these kinds of speeds with that little voltage. So, yeah, like, this 6000... And, man, it's not even that expensive. Oh, and, well, so with DDR5, having dual rank memory sticks does have a slight performance per clock advantage, but it's very slight. It's not like DDR4 where you have a huge uplift, because DDR5 already has twice as many bank groups in each memory rank. So there are still some timings that are significantly better with dual rank, which is mainly your like read to write transitions. Or is it write to read transitions? I think it's write to read transitions are significantly faster if you have a second rank to do them on. Um, but everything else is basically the same and the clocks are lower. So this is really like I wouldn't be buying 64 gig kits just because it's like, oh, it's dual rank, it's faster, because it is, but not that much. And yeah, but if you want a lot of capacity, you do get that like extra performance uplift from the dual rank as well. Um, so I honestly would probably take this over some of the high speed 16 gig sticks, right? Like say, well, not this. This is still pretty cost effective, but wasn't there like a 7800? Yeah, like I would take the dual rank kit over something like a 7800 CL38. Um, just because the compatibility in this is actually going to be a lot better, just because the speed is lower. Because the thing with the memory speeds is like you have sort of how hard it is for like I think the issue with the really really high speeds on Intel is that like the memory controller just starts breaking up like on the CPU end of it. Like I don't even think it's necessarily a signaling issue to the memory sticks. It's impossible to know for sure when, you're getting like one error every 8 hours or something. But yeah, it's just kind of like once you hit really high speeds, the stability gets really weird. Whereas with dual rank, like even with something like this, you would probably still be able to hit like 6600 on a lot of motherboards. And if you're on a 1 DIMM per channel, you might even be able to do like 7000, 7200. And the fact that it's dual rank is basically going to offset the clock speed difference, right? That you have between single rank and dual rank memory configurations. So from even a performance perspective, these dual rank kits from Team Group actually kind of make sense. Because they are cost competitive to the like high speed 16 gig sticks. And the high speed 16 gig sticks are not going to work a lot of the time, so may as well like if you want to spend a lot of money on your memory kits, you may as well get dual rank sticks instead, because the you won't have like you won't necessarily have to deal with all the instability that high speeds cause. Like you still won't, like obviously if you try to push dual rank to, like 7000 on a lot of motherboards, that's going to be quite difficult. But it's going to be less difficult than say 7800 on pretty much any motherboard. Um, so yeah. Anyway, so we have those Team Group kits. Then G-Skill has this like 5600 36 bin. Is that 36 flat? Ugh. So this is probably Samsung. I would avoid that. This probably has, yeah, I would avoid this. This looks very Samsung. I have low expectations for this working reliably. Because the Samsung memory chips are kind of a pain for the memory controllers to deal with right now. Then we have a Team Group 6038. So I guess if you want a more better XMP profile, technically this would be viable for Samsung, but I don't think they would be pushing Samsung in dual rank to DDR5 6000, just because that's a bad idea with Samsung memory chips from a compatibility perspective. And then we have like a 5628. This should be Hynix. Also, this should work basically everywhere because the speed is really low. What else do we have? We have 6030 from G-Skill, so that's another solid, like, guaranteed Hynix option. And also with this, you wouldn't really have to, like, overclock it yourself. So yeah, I would be considering this, especially because like the price increase. Like yeah, there's you're paying extra for the slightly tighter time. Oh, well, actually, going from 48 to 30, that's into the realm of okay, this actually makes a difference, like a pretty substantial difference at this point. So yeah, like this is like I'd buy this if you're open, like if you want to tune your memory yourself, this exists and it's a better like it's more cost effective. But if you don't want to tune your memory yourself, this is going to be faster and, the cost isn't like massively higher, so this can make sense. Um, let's see. Oh, and then we have some 6400 rated dual rank kits, which okay, that's like Intel exclusive. Um, Honestly, the prices on a lot of these aren't that bad. Yeah, like it's not that bad. Like I was really expecting to see some like ridiculous, like not actually that fast and price being insanely high kits, but that's not really a thing, right? It's not like the 16 gig sticks where if you go up to like DDR5 8000, the kit costs like $300 and works on one motherboard. Um, oh, there's a 6800 2x32 bin. That is really like that is pushing the limits. Oh, and G Skill has one too. There's also a 6600. I wonder what the timings are like between this G Skill 6800 and the 6600 Corsair. So this is 3239, okay, and this is 3445. Yeah, okay, I would take this instead. Because 6800 on dual rank, like there are potentially some motherboard and CPU combinations out there for Intel that would not necessarily just work at 6800 on dual rank. Whereas I've done 6600 on 4x16, right? Which is really not ideal considering that all the Z790 motherboards are daisy chain. So if 4x16 can do 6600, 2x32 should always do 6600. And also the timings on this are significantly tighter than the 6800 kit. And with dual rank, the speed sort of matters somewhat less again. Um, so yeah, in this case, I would take this kit instead of this. So I would put that as like my high, like this is the like high XMP option. Um, where's that G skill? This is like I don't like so this is like don't want to deal with compatibility issues and also don't want to manually overclock. Uh, or like so this is like dual rank, but I don't want to think about it. This is like this doesn't really make a ton of sense. This does. Yeah, because the price difference between these two isn't that big in the... Oh, this is 30 40, whereas this is what, 38 flat. Yeah. Um... Okay, I think these are basic. I would consider these kind of interchangeable. Oh no, don't do that to me. Edge, no. No! Stop doing that. This is so stupid. Why would you want this in... Nope. I'm going to compile a list of this after recording the video. But yeah, so I would consider, so don't want to think about it. These two I would kind of consider interchangeable because, yeah, there's a timing difference, but it's just the primaries. It's not going to make that much of a difference. And then this would be like I want a high-speed XMP, but I also I want it to actually work very consistently. I would go for this. Like 6800 probably isn't too bad, but I have trust issues with the Intel memory controller. Serious trust issues. Like I spent way too much time trying to solve stability problems that take hours to show up. I don't like dealing with that. If it errored out in 15 minutes, I wouldn't complain so much. That's why I like the Ryzen memory controller. It either doesn't work at all or it does. There's none of this like awkward scenario where it's like, "Oh, I ran a stress test for 12 hours and then it errored." Anyway, oh, and then we have like the cost effective, but you have to basically tune it manually options from Team Group here, right? With the 5600 46 kit and the 6048 kit. Anyway, let's take a look at 2x48. I mean, 2x48, not 4x48. Wait, is 4x48 even a thing? Yeah, 5200, I guess. And even then, it might not work. Anyway, 2x48. Though I guess 4x48 has better chances of working than 4x32 because at least it's going to be. Actually, it's only Corsair, so you might not even get the good Hynix chips. It might be Micron. Um, so yeah, that's fun. Anyway, yeah, so we have these G-Skill 2x48 kits in 6400. Um, oh, Team Group has a 6800 and 2x48. 36. That has to be Hynix. That literally, yeah, that has to be Hynix. So this is a not a cost-effective option, but an interesting one. It's actually not that much worse in terms of pricing compared to the G-Skill kits, but performance-wise, it's not going to be a huge upgrade, right? Because it's just 400 megabits per second, and the timings are getting a lot looser. Yeah. So, well, at the same time, in terms of a percent increase, the price isn't that different. Right? This is like a 5% price increase. I'm not sure you're going to get a 5% performance improvement, though. Because that's not much of a speed difference. But, you know, like, this is an option, I guess. Oh, but G-Skill does have a 6400 in at a lower price. So I'd go for that. Like, I would just get the cheapest one. And then we have a bunch of, like, Micron... Actually, no, these G-Skill bins... I don't know what these might be. G-Skill doesn't tend... Like, G-Skill does use Micron, but a lot less than they use, like, Samsung and Hynix for some reason. So, yeah, I'm really not sure what this would actually be. It's probably Hynix. In which case, it could be a really good deal. Whereas Corsair, this 5200, I bet you that is Micron. Like, yeah, 52, that is almost certainly Micron. G-Skill has a 5640 at a higher price for some reason. 5640 at a higher price for some reason. Oh, it's because these are RGB. I'm like, wait, the spec is the same. Why does it cost more money? Oh, it's got silly LEDs on it. I forgot. Those cost money. $30 for LED. Actually, like $50 for LEDs. Yay. Those be some premium LEDs right there. Must have an LED shortage at the LED from... Because like RGB LEDs are like, they don't cost anything. They're LEDs. But anyway, yeah, so here we don't have, like, I would basically avoid the Corsair kits, because with the Corsair kits, there's a very high probability of Micron. Whereas with G-Skill, I think you're almost, like, very likely to get Hynix. But if you want to guarantee Hynix, definitely go for the 6400 rated kits. Yeah. Even like, I would even be suspicious of these 5600 kits potentially being Micron from G-Skill. Because, yeah, G-Skill does use Micron. It's just far less, like... It's much less common. Like G-Skill has like a bin of DDR4 that can technically be done with both Micron and Hynix memory chips, but I've only ever seen it with Hynix memory chips from G-Skill. Whereas other manufacturers, you get Hynix, you get Micron, you get Samsung, you get Nanya, you get like every memory chip under the sun that can do that bin will show up in that bin, and G-Skill tends to be really focused on like just Samsung and Hynix memory chips most of the time. So, yeah, that doesn't rule out the possibility of these being Micron, though. But they probably aren't. So anyway, that's the DDR5 kits. I guess I'm gonna compile this into a list and like post that list somewhere. But yeah, I think right now in terms of performance per dollar, I mean you can't beat this. It's $70. It's guaranteed Hynix, probably a die, or almost certainly a die. Like 99% a die. and it's $73, and like it'll do like this will max out your memory controller. It'll max out your motherboard. There is very little reason to buy anything else if you actually want to overclock your memory yourself. If you don't want to overclock your memory yourself, you like for Ryzen, I would be looking at like a 6000 CL30 or honestly even a CL. No, actually I wouldn't. Um, but yeah, or like a 6000 CL32. Right, these are basically 32, 38, 30, 40 is like interchangeable as far as I'm concerned. Um, Then for Intel, you have like the 6600 CL32 option and like 6800 CL34, 6800 CL34. Um, and then the high speed stuff like 7200, 7600, 7800 is like if you don't like having a stable system, good luck. Because the thing is with the high speed kits is like, okay, you put this in your system, decent chance the XMP doesn't work, and you're putting yourself into the same situation that you would be in with a kit like this, but you're doing it at a much higher price, right? Because with this, you have to manually overclock it. With this, you might have to manually fix the stability, which is the same thing as manually overclocking. It's just you can't say, oh, I overclocked my memory because it was already rated for 7800. It's the auto settings that don't work. So, yeah, then again, I've been kind of avoiding Intel DDR5 overclocking for like a couple months now, so maybe the manufacturers have maybe there's been some BIOS updates that fix the compatibility, but I kind of doubt it. So, yeah, I would just generally not go above 6800. Or if you're going to go above 6800, just buy this 5600 rated kit from Team Group and tune it yourself. It'll cost you less money, and you'll have all the same problems that you would if you bought a high-speed kit, right? Because Hynix 8i is very, very consistent. The Intel memory controller isn't consistent. So, anyway, oh, and avoid these I'm sure there's other examples. Wait, no, is it? Oh yeah. Avoid these like super duper loose Corsair bins where you have like 7,000, 40, 52. Anyway, then we have the 2x32 options, which again, we have the T-Create from Team Group in both 5600 and 6000. These are almost certainly Hynix of some kind. Then we have the 6600 CL32 Corsair. And then like 6000 CL30. This is like a Ryzen option. This is Intel. Yeah, so I'm going to compile a list out of this, but there. So that's my current, like, sort of highlights for DDR5 memory kit options right now. This is the kind of specs that I would be looking at and the kind of prices I would be hoping to get them at. So, yeah, hopefully this is somewhat helpful. And that's it for the video. So thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon. There's a link to that down in the description below. There's also the HOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, hoodies, posters, the usual YouTuber merch. And I've also got a Bandcamp. There's a link to all of that down in the description below. It would be much appreciated if you'd, support the channel through those. So yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.